My name is Elise Granger. I've spent most of my life learning how to take up less space, how to be helpful without being noticed, how to arrive without being seen. I was the second daughter, the one who always knew how to keep her voice down, how to say thank you when someone forgot my birthday, how to wear a smile like armor. It was my sister, Corinne's birthday party. Again, a grand garden affair, string lights, champagne, tall heels and tall tails. And I arrived on time like I always did, with a carefully chosen gift and absolutely no expectations. You learn not to expect much when you've grown up as the family's silent understudy. The moment I stepped into that garden, I knew my role had already been decided. My name card, if there was one, was tucked near the ice bucket and the folding chairs. The kind of placement that says, "We didn't forget you, we just didn't make room for you." I was seated beside a stack of unused linens and a cooler filled with melting ice. No one looked twice. My parents were laughing at something Corinne's boss said. My aunt waved absently like I'd caught her off guard just by existing. Corinne wore a golden sash across her chest that read, "Marketing Maven," and a crown of artificial peonies like she was the queen of something real. She was the kind of person who knew how to gather attention without asking for it, the kind who soaked compliments in like water and never seemed full. And just before the first toast ended, a microphone in hand, she leaned in with a rehearsed sparkle in her voice. To my team, my mentors, my inspiration, and to Elise, who's always been excellent at setting up the chairs. A giggle, a pause, laughter from all directions. Even my father. A sharp chuckle like it didn't cost him anything to join in. I didn't laugh. I've trained my mouth to curve upward when necessary, but my jaw clenched behind the smile. You learn that kind of control when your worth is the punchline, when dignity is something you have to hold quietly in your lap like a glass too full. But let me ask you something. What happens when the one they've always ignored is the one holding all the receipts? What happens when the joke they've been telling walks up and rewrites the punchlines? Sit with me here for a while because what happened next didn't begin that night. It began years before in the quiet hours they never paid attention to. From my seat near the trash bags, I watched the show unfold. White tablecloths, gold accents, a harpist playing something classical but with a pop twist, tastefully performative like everything else. Corinne was gliding from table to table, performing her version of approachable brilliance, always smiling, always one foot pointed perfectly for the photo. Even the children seemed to orbit around her like trained satellites. Me, I smelled like plastic and citrus wipes. No one asked me to move, no one asked me anything. A woman in a white blazer leaned down near me. "Oh, are you Corinne's admin?" she asked with a squint, like I might be an event volunteer. I just nodded. I didn't correct her. Because this wasn't new. This wasn't unique. This was simply consistent. I've been invisible in rooms full of people who share my last name. Not hated, not resented, just forgotten. It's a strange kind of erasure to exist in the margins of someone else's highlight reel. I remember being 13 and my birthday fell on the same weekend as Corinne's dance showcase. The solution: combine the celebration. Corinne twirled on stage in white satin. I wore my cousin's old dress, still carrying the scent of attic cedar and old perfume. She got applause. I got a group cupcake with someone else's name on it. That was the year I stopped asking for anything. The year I realized that being quiet wouldn't win me affection, but it would spare me disappointment. At 17, she got a hand-delivered acceptance letter and a trip to New York. I got a summer job at the same office where she'd interned filing papers for the assistant who used to bring her coffee. She became Corinne the Golden One. I became Elise. Oh, right, you're Corinne's sister. They didn't know what I'd been building. They never asked. They thought I answered phones, maybe did some bookkeeping. And I let them think that because real leverage moves in silence. 7 years ago, I made my first angel investment in a struggling logistics startup. Then another, this time, a digital distribution company. Then I established a shell corp just in time to acquire a controlling stake in a national marketing agency. Guess who works there now? I never demoted her, never interfered. I watched. I reviewed quarterly reports, approved and declined campaign budgets, flagged proposals for ethical review. The campaign they toasted that night declined, lack of originality. She never knew I was the one who sent it back. They called me quiet. I called it precision. They called me distant. I called it discipline. Corinne liked to say I think like a CEO, but she never asked who she was really presenting to. Then the Tesla arrived. I heard the soft hum of tires first, then the slow swing of the gate. And out stepped Marcus Hale, CEO of the parent company. The man every exec in that garden had spent months trying to get a meeting with. Corinne's breath caught. Oh my God, that's Marcus. That's my boss. He didn't look at her. He walked past the champagne tower, past the photographers, past the well-dressed crowd, and came to a stop right in front of me. Elise, he said, didn't expect to see you here. Not Miss Granger, not Corinne's sister, just Elise, like someone who mattered. I looked up. Wasn't planning to stay long, I replied. He leaned in slightly. We need to talk about the Freeman acquisition. Tomorrow's call is key. I nodded. I'll send the documents tonight. He offered a small nod, then turned and disappeared into the blur of glitter and noise. Behind me, the conversation stalled. Corinne's smile cracked like a fault line she hadn't prepared for. The clinking of glasses slowed. People turned. One or two exchanged glances. They were starting to realize what I already knew. You can only ignore the quiet one until the silence becomes too loud to look away from. And I wasn't done. Corinne was still frozen in place, clutching her glass like it could steady the tectonic shift beneath her heels. Her boss, the one she'd bragged about over every holiday dinner, hadn't even glanced at her. Not a nod, not a smile. Just walked past her and addressed the useless sister like the decision maker in the room. And for the first time, they all noticed. I didn't revel in it. I didn't smirk or gloat. I didn't need to. Power doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It moves like gravity, silent but undeniable. Corinne stood there blinking, trying to hold her composure. But something had cracked in the show she'd been performing all her life. Her co-workers, once orbiting her like polished moons, began to drift subtly toward the other side of the garden. Toward me. I saw Amanda, a junior manager, whisper something to a colleague. Amanda. I remembered her file. She was almost cut during last year's layoffs. Her numbers weren't great, but her initiative was. I'd advocated for her quietly with a single note on a spreadsheet: retain. Future potential. She had no idea it had been me who saved her job, but maybe now. She suspected. One by one, awareness began to move through the party like a soft current. A laugh that didn't land. A silence that lasted a little too long. A server glanced in my direction, nodded respectfully, and kept moving. And then came my father, still holding a red plastic cup like it was a badge of casual wisdom. He ambled toward me with a half smile that made my stomach tighten with old familiar weight. Well, look who's still playing secretary. He chuckled, eyeing my low heels like they confirmed a story he'd already told himself. Corinne says you're, what was it, comfortable in your little role. That's good, isn't it? Some people chase too hard. I didn't respond, not right away. He bit into a slider like he'd delivered something profound. You know, he said between chews, I helped your cousin get a grant last year. Used your LLC name. Hope you don't mind. Women-owned businesses look great on paper. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. You used my company's name, I asked, my voice quiet but unshakable. Don't be so dramatic. He laughed. You weren't using it. It was for family. No apology, not even awareness. He didn't see the violation. He never had. You used my identity, I said again. He waved a hand. That's why people overlook you, Elise. You take everything so seriously. I leaned in slightly. No, I said. You overlook me because you only see what makes you feel comfortable. And I've never been that. I walked past him, slow, steady, my breath like a drum in my chest. Near the fountain, I heard Corinne's voice rise louder than before, desperate for laughter to follow. She was retelling the campaign story again. Her campaign, the one I denied. They said I think like a CEO, she giggled. Said I see the whole picture. And for a long time, I let her believe that. But not tonight. At the long banquet table beside the shrimp cocktail and artisan cheeses, I placed a thick manila envelope. Not a scene, not a confrontation. Just clarity. Corinne saw it immediately. Her expression shifted just slightly. A twitch at the corner of her mouth, a flutter in her fingers. Something she'd buried deep inside was waking up. She stepped forward. What's that? She asked, too bright, too loud. I didn't touch the envelope. Proof, I said simply. She tried to smile. You think this makes you better than me? I tilted my head. No, it just makes me honest. She narrowed her eyes. You're jealous. And that's when I smiled. The first real one all night. If I'm so beneath you, I asked, why are you the one trembling? Her hand twitched. For a second, I thought she'd grab the envelope, tear it open, scream. But she didn't. Not with everyone watching, not when the spotlight had tilted slightly irrevocably in my direction. Behind her, people were whispering now. Not about the sash or the cake or the champagne tower. About me, Elise. The one they'd never bothered to name in the family slideshow. Then came Marcus again. Thank you for signing off on the transfer, Miss Granger, he said loud enough for the people around us to hear. It's official. Corinne turned eyes wide. Transfer? I nodded. Tempe office? Smaller branch? Less public? A good place for reflection. You could hear the air tighten. Someone coughed. Someone else put down a fork. My mother sat down heavily in the white wicker chair beside the floral arch. Her eyes looked far away. Corinne stood completely still, sash glittering, nails perfect, image crumbling. I didn't wait for permission. I took a step forward and let my voice ring just enough. For years, I said you called me too quiet, too passive. But what you didn't understand was that I wasn't empty. I was full of everything you never bothered to look for. People stopped pretending not to listen. I wasn't folding chairs, I continued. I was signing checks. And with that, I left the envelope behind next to the broken illusions and party favors and walked away. Past the drink table, past the awkward silences, past the family that had shaped me by ignoring me. And just before I reached the gate, I passed the old folding chair they'd sat me in. I didn't even glance at it, because it had never defined me. Not anymore. Behind me, the party kept moving like a song they couldn't quite dance to anymore. No one laughed. No one clapped. But they didn't forget me this time, and that was enough. 3 days passed. No texts, no apologies, no explanations wrapped in family guilt. Just silence. But this time it wasn't emptiness. It was peace. On Monday, I arrived at the office before my assistant had her second coffee. Morning, Elise, she said, smiling. The Freeman call is at 10. Your team is ready. I nodded, slid on my glasses, and opened the folder. Thanks. Later that day, during our quarterly leadership meeting, a young intern stood up as I entered. Would you like this chair, Miss Granger? He asked, gesturing to the seat beside the window. I paused, eyes on the chair. It reminded me too much of the folding one. The afterthought. The one that always faced the trash. So I stepped past it and gently pulled out the chair at the head of the table. I think I've earned this one, I said quietly. He didn't laugh. He just nodded and helped me adjust it. That afternoon, Marcus dropped by. Corinne resigned, he said, casually leaning on my doorframe. Said she needed to realign her values. He smirked slightly, but I didn't respond. I didn't want to ruin her, I said almost to myself. I just wanted the truth to matter. It does, Marcus replied, because you made it matter. As he left, my assistant placed a small envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside, a folded card. Thank you for seeing someone like me. You gave me hope, Art. I stared at it for a long time. It was from the young server, the one who'd whispered ma'am and moved on. The one who'd seen something real that night. I tucked the card into the top drawer beside the old watch I inherited from my father. One reminded me of time lost, the other of how I chose to use it. Weeks later, at a cousin's wedding, I saw my name printed in gold beside my mother's right in the front row. But I didn't sit there. I walked past the seat and found a spot near the window, quiet and dignified. Not because I was angry, not because I felt small, but because I had built my own table. And once you've built the room, you never need to beg for a chair. The wedding was lovely. Ivory roses, string quartet. That kind of soft, focused glow people imagine when they talk about perfect family moments. But perfection is a costume stitched together with unspoken rules and fragile smiles. And I'd spent enough years learning how those seams hold. At the reception, I sat near the back, not because I was excluded this time, but because I'd chosen solitude. When you've spent years being overlooked, you learn to love your own company. There's clarity in distance, in silence. A server offered me champagne. I declined. I didn't come to be seen. I came to observe. From where I sat, I watched as my parents floated from table to table, greeting relatives like royalty, telling familiar stories with exaggerated hand gestures. My mother in navy chiffon, my father with that same knowing half smile that used to make me feel smaller than I was. They hadn't spoken to me since Corinne's party. Not a call, not a text, not even a shared family group message. And honestly, I didn't mind. There's a strange kind of relief that comes when the noise stops, when the people who never saw you finally fall silent. I glanced toward the front row, my name still printed in script beside my mother's on the golden name card, an empty symbol of inclusion. A gesture offered too late. That chair had once represented everything I thought I wanted validation approval proof that I belonged. Now, it was just furniture. I'd spent years chasing proximity to people who had never asked who I really was. And somewhere along the line, I stopped needing them to. A small girl, maybe 5 or 6, broke away from the dance floor and ran past me in silver shoes. Her laugh was real. Not the polished kind, not the curated kind, just joy pure and reckless. I smiled. That used to be me. Before the silences grew sharp, before the expectations narrowed into single lanes. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if someone had asked me early on what I actually wanted. Not what I was good at, not what was expected, but what I dreamed of. It's such a simple thing to ask a girl what she sees when she pictures her future. But no one ever asked, so I built it quietly. And I made sure that the next girl who felt invisible would never have to wonder if someone like her could build anything at all. After the wedding, I returned to the city, back to my apartment on the 34th floor. Floor to ceiling windows. Not because I needed the view, but because I needed the space, the air. The reminder that no matter how high you climb, you're still just one person looking out at a world that rarely pauses for anyone. I poured a glass of water, removed my shoes, turned off the noise, and let myself be. That night, I pulled open the drawer of my desk and reread the note from R, the young server. Thank you for seeing someone like me. You gave me hope. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest, and it was enough. Because that's all I'd ever really wanted, not applause, not revenge, just for the truth to be seen. For someone, even one person, to say, I saw what you did. And it mattered. The next morning, I met Marcus at the firm's downtown tower. The sun hadn't risen fully, and the marble floors still held the chill of night. We walked together in silence for a moment before he spoke. She submitted her formal resignation, he said. No negotiation, no drama. I nodded. That's good. She didn't name you. She never would, I said. He looked at me. You surprised her. No, I said. I reminded her. There's a difference between surprise and revelation. Surprise is short-lived. Revelation stays with you. It reorders your memory. We took the elevator to the 49th floor, my floor, the suite reserved for executive strategy. A long time ago, I would have felt intimidated by the title. Chief Vision Officer. It sounds theatrical, grand. But now it felt earned. Not because I played the game, but because I rewrote the rules. We entered the boardroom, glass walls, quiet power. Marcus handed me a file. The acquisitions in Atlanta and Denver. I'll need your signature before the end of the week. I skimmed the summary. Numbers, projections, potential bottlenecks. My domain. Atlanta's solid, I said. Denver's fragile. Market saturation is a risk. He nodded. I trust your call. Funny, isn't it? How the girl who folded chairs is now greenlighting eight-figure deals. But it wasn't revenge. That's the thing no one understands. I didn't build this to prove them wrong. I built it because it was the only way I could live with myself. Because I knew what it felt like to sit in a room and be invisible. And I vowed that one day I'd create rooms that see people. Really see them. After the meeting, I stopped by the 15th floor. HR culture initiatives. I didn't usually get involved directly, but something told me today was different. Amanda, the junior manager from Corinne's department, was waiting outside the glass doors. She stood when she saw me, unsure whether to wave or bow or run. Miss Granger, she said. Elise, I corrected. I'm not here to intimidate you. She nodded. Thank you for not letting them fire me. I blinked. You know, she smiled shyly. I guessed, after the party. And, well, the way you looked at me that night, like I wasn't invisible. You're not, she exhaled. I'm still learning, but I won't waste it. Good, I said, because one day someone will try to make you feel small again. And when that happens, I want you to remember how many rooms you're already in, even the ones they don't know you built. She swallowed hard. Thank you. No, I said, thank yourself. That night, as I rode home in the back seat of a town car, I watched the city blur past in streaks of light. People rushing phones, ringing lives unfolding. So much noise. And yet beneath it, something simple. Everyone is carrying something they never say aloud. Some people carry shame, others doubt. I carried invisibility for decades. But here's the truth: the things you carry don't make you weak. They make you aware. And awareness is power. It's what lets you walk into a room and know exactly who you are, even if no one else does. At home, I changed into an old sweatshirt, washed off the makeup, pulled my hair back. No crown, no title, just Elise. Just the woman who built her name from the ground up. I sat on the balcony and opened a journal I hadn't touched in months. At the top of the page, I wrote, what they said, too quiet, too serious, too much. What I became, enough. And underneath it, proof is peace. Sometimes you don't need to expose anyone. You just need to stop hiding yourself. I closed the journal and leaned back in the chair, the city humming below me. Somewhere out there, someone else was being overlooked tonight, silenced, diminished. But maybe they'll find this story. Maybe they'll see that silence doesn't mean absence. That folding chairs doesn't mean folding dreams. And that one day their name will be on the envelope. Not because they shouted the loudest, but because they were always the one paying attention. Weeks passed. Autumn made its way into the city. The air turned sharper. Mornings arrived dressed in gray. People rushed a little faster, and the world continued pretending not to notice the quiet ones. But I noticed them. On a Tuesday morning, I took the long way to work, past the corner bakery where the baristas remember no one's names, past the crosswalk where the city's invisible souls stand too close to the edge, waiting for something that rarely arrives on time. And on a bench near the library steps sat a girl with a stack of folders in her lap. Her hands moved with practiced speed, flipping, sorting, annotating. Efficient. Unseen. I slowed for a moment. Something about her, how she tried not to take up space, felt familiar. I knew that rhythm. I had lived that rhythm. That night, I left an envelope at the front desk of the library. Inside a card with her name, a handwritten note, and a contact number for an entry-level role in one of our subsidiaries. I never signed the note. I didn't have to. I wasn't building empires anymore just to be recognized. I was building spaces, places where the quiet ones didn't have to prove they belonged before being invited in. Because the ones who've been silenced often carry the clearest truth. Corinne reached out once. An email, short, measured, unapologetic. I suppose you got what you wanted. I guess you always saw yourself as better than me. See. I stared at it for a long moment before closing the tab. Not because I was angry, not because I had anything left to prove, but because responding would have meant I still needed something from her. And I didn't. The thing no one tells you about healing is this: it's not loud. It doesn't arrive in grand gestures or final confrontations. It happens quietly in the background when you finally stop waiting for the people who hurt you to fix it. Sometimes the apology is never spoken. And sometimes the silence is all the closure you need. In December, I flew to Berlin for a week-long summit. The halls were filled with decision makers, innovators, visionaries, people with stories, titles, scars. On the second day, during a roundtable on ethical leadership, a woman raised her hand. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, steady voice. Do you think leaders should always reveal the battles they've fought to get here? I paused before answering. No, I said, but I think they should never pretend they didn't bleed. She nodded, slowly, like she understood. After the session, she approached me. I read your name on a proposal once, she said, years ago. You denied my campaign, but your margin notes, they stayed with me. She smiled. They weren't cruel, just honest. You didn't just say no, you said not yet. Refine this. You're almost there. I wasn't ready to hear it back then, but I am now. I nodded, and for a long second, neither of us said anything. Sometimes that's enough. To be remembered not for what you gave, but for what you saw in someone before they saw it in themselves. I returned from Berlin lighter, not from relief, but from release. That week, I asked our hiring board to expand the mentorship initiative, not as a favor to my past self, but as an investment in someone else's future. It was time to build more doors than mirrors. By spring, my name had become a kind of quiet currency in rooms I rarely entered. And yet I stayed behind the curtain, not out of fear, but out of freedom. There's something sacred about no longer needing to be the loudest in the room. Something powerful in choosing when and where to let your name ring. At a foundation gala in March, someone introduced me to a young founder. Miss Granger, this is Sophia. She just launched a platform connecting underfunded women-owned ventures with investors. She said your story inspired her. I turned to her. What part of my story? I asked. She smiled. The part where you didn't scream to be heard, you just changed the room. I smiled back. In May, I visited the Chicago office where it all began. The building looked smaller now, but inside it buzzed with the kind of electricity only purpose can generate. I met with a group of first-year analysts, nervous, hungry, just like I had been. One of them, a soft-spoken man named Jamal, stayed behind after the session. Can I ask you something? He said, voice low. How did you know you were enough? I thought about that for a while. And then I said, because for years I thought being invisible meant I had no value. But now I understand it meant no one ever got close enough to distort who I was becoming. He exhaled like a weight had left his chest. That makes sense, he said. Good, I replied. Now go build something with it. And he did. 6 months later, I saw his name on the shortlist for a Global Sustainability Award. I didn't reach out. I didn't take credit. But I smiled. The world was shifting, and I had helped tilt the axis, even if only slightly. Corinne sent one more message, this time on paper, a card, handwritten. You were right. I never saw you. I didn't want to. I thought love was competition. I didn't know how to admire you without feeling less. But I do now. I'm sorry. I'm still learning. C. I folded the card and placed it in the drawer beside R's note, one above the other. Not trophies, just truth. In July, my parents came to town. They asked to meet for coffee. I said yes, not for them. For me, we sat outside a cafe in the shade, the hum of traffic soft behind us. My mother wore sunglasses. My father looked older, smaller. For the first 10 minutes, we talked about the weather. Then my father cleared his throat. I read an article about you, he said. Oh, he nodded. The one about the woman who rebuilt a company from the inside without ever taking the stage. My mother adjusted her sunglasses. They said you were the strategist behind the curtain. Sounds right, I said. They nodded. Silence. And then finally, we were wrong, my father said. We didn't know what to look for, my mother added. I stirred my coffee. You didn't want to know. They both looked down. I'm not angry anymore, I said, but I needed you to hear that. They nodded again. I'm proud of you, he said softly. She reached for my hand. Me too. And for the first time, I believed them. Not because they finally saw me, but because I didn't need them to. Love, real love, is not earned through obedience. It's not measured by noise. It's offered freely, and sometimes it arrives late. But late is still better than never. That night, I stood by my window and watched the city lights flicker like heartbeat pulses. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who waited by the dessert table, the one who smiled through a ruined birthday, the one who folded chairs and swallowed her own voice. She didn't disappear. She evolved. She became a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. A woman who knew that her value wasn't in being visible, it was in being undeniable. And as I turned away from the window and headed toward sleep, I whispered into the quiet, "You made it. Not to the top, not to revenge, but to truth." And that was always enough.